who's been on the team for a while. He used to be in Argentina, then he was in Brazil, then he came back, but he also played a few games of OGN, as you might know, but he didn't really do anything. It's, for me, both all these three rosters, the Jin agreements, the KT Waltz, the KT Waltz, of course, has now moved Fixer over. The moment they brought Pickable in, they benched their support Sage here and brought Fixer to this roster. And Najin here with Peanut, Tank, Zeva, and Kane. If you look down these teams, well, I think these teams are at least all better than IM, Anarchy, and Spanu. What Spanu is using here is a roster even worse than the LGN roster. At least better than these teams, maybe even better than the Samsung main roster. I mean, you can surely make the point.
Yeah.
There are players in here that have been to OGN finals. There are players in here that are as good as the starters on their main lineup in the OGN, and in some cases you can even argue would be the better choice. And I feel like it's a very weird implication it has for this scene, because you watch OGN and you realize 3 of the best teams in the region are not there. We get to see Spano, we get to see Anarchy, we get to see IM, but there are 3 teams in Korea that are better than these. And these are not just random subs thrown together. These are full 5-man roster teams, and they are there, and they are not in OGN. They're not allowed to qualify for OGN, and we will likely not see them in that way. I find it quite ridiculous. Just having to watch games of Spano, you know that these are not, or just watching OGN in general, the bottom 2 teams, and realizing OGN has not the best top 10 teams of Korea, and they will likely never have again.
Oh. They have 6, and Samsung has a chance of making it there with a few shakeups or time.
Yes.
We've touched on this, but now that the leagues actually are beginning, it's become more apparent. I mean, I think Dom or Kafka was talking about how Najin's top laner in their League 2 team is not a top laner, just like play this lane, whatever. We have Peanut, Tank, Zephyr, and Kane. Don't fuck it up. Enjoy your win.
Yeah.
The death of the sister team was the worst thing that happened in Korea.
It was bad.
Well, the sister teams didn't really die. They still exist.
Well,
all
okay.
Yeah.
I guess it's not the death, but them not being allowed to participate in the league.
It hurt the main
deficit because they didn't release the players.
Yes.
They just said, sorry, we're going to pay you to never fucking play and just sit in the house and scrim us.
Yeah, but
have fun.
Yeah, and I think it's something that goes back to Bootwalk. Korean teams will always want to have these practice squads for in-house practice. And just by saying you're not allowed to officially have a second team, have 2 teams compete under your organization, does not mean in any way they're actually going to release these players. I mean, you even see this in China right now. We have these OMG and EDG have their second team, OMD and ADG in the LSPL. And once they realized, oh shit, our second teams are coming close to actually qualifying. If they qualify, we might have to rebrand them. Or we have to, in the worst case, we have to sell our good players to other orgs. They immediately said, nope, we don't want that. We take out all the stars of both teams, make them instead subs on the main roster. Now EDG and OMG both have 7 or 8 substitutes on their main roster, and their LSPL teams, they're carefully managing them. They are, as soon as both were bottom of the table, they brought in back in a bit new players, so they don't fall out of LSPL. So they still have these, for case of emergency, a second team, a second spot next to LPL they can quickly elevate. But they're very careful. They don't want their second team to qualify. They whether their players, even when they have a second team, as subs on their main roster, because they know at the highest tier they cannot own 2 teams. So why put them out there and we can't use them? We would rather make sure we keep them for in-house practice.
Well, do you think there's a chance that if, say, ADG or OMD won and made it into the qualifiers, do you think that instead of having to rebrand and everything, they would just do what happened to kind of the mix of, I think it was King and GAMT, they kind of formed together, and then Starhorn Royal basically purchased King and put their team on that. Don't you think that that would just happen where you're going to have these 12 teams in LPL that constantly the ones that drop out automatically just rebuy their way back in because the other teams that made, like the sister teams that made it in, they just don't want them to make it in, and they just like, have this spot, take it, we'll take your money, and then you can have the 5 names, and we'll just make an instead of OMD, it'll be OME or OMF, or however many letters they need to continue going.
Yeah, that's something I could see indeed happening. And I
Why
mean,
not?
we now have young Glowy in the LSPL. They are very likely to qualify for LPL, and I'm not sure if they are going to. And right now they are closely tied to IG. They do not share the name anymore. They used to be IG Young, but now they are this just Young Glowy. But they still live together as a team, and I'm not sure what is going to happen when they qualify. But yeah, that's also one thing that the Korean teams could be doing. But right now, I'm not. On the one hand, I'm not sure these like complete sellouts of spots and rosters will be allowed in Korea under Casper.
I don't think it would.
Yeah,
I think Casper's a
because
bit too tied to
Yeah.
Riot now.
In the past they also already had these rules where you need to keep a certain amount of players to keep your circuit points, to keep your OGN spot. I don't see whether it should be changed right now. I mean, at least this League 2 exists, and I'm very curious to see how the qualification is going to work, because I don't think has been info released that they're now playing inter-league matches. I mean,
I think only the
it's
Challenger 1 can qualify for
yeah,
champions.
but I've filed it. But it's very hard to say that we should have these Challenger 1 teams qualify if they're in the interleague matches or lose to the League 2 teams. I mean, I'm not saying League 1 is that bad. I mean, just by the fact that MKZ and Winners, the 2 teams from the start you thought they would be the best because they have the names on the roster, you know them, that they are not just middle of the pack. We now have Dark Wolves and Ever, which I don't really know much about, I have to say this. But
yeah, I looked at their team and I don't notice.
I don't really have an idea here. But just with the fact that we have those new teams that actually going over the established Challenger teams may be a sign that there is some kind of talent, but I still see. But I don't
there's
really
probably
see
talent there.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's talent that we just don't know their names because they're the second team of CJ or the third team of CJ, and they just live in the house and play in the house, and we just never hear of them because they don't get to play like in actual live games.
Those players get the exposure. I feel like mainly because they stream. Not all orgs make this, but for example, KT or CJ, they all make all their substitutes stream on a Zubo as well. So at least you can see something of them. You know who is on the CJ at the moment. It wasn't always the case back in the time when they had every org had 2 teams, and then other few substitutes in there. It wasn't entirely sure which player is living with which org and who is on there. But right now, especially that we have League 2, it's pretty clear which substitute is on which roster, and you have at least some way to look at them.
The thing I have to bring up too is the way the playoff structure is for champions now, or for OGN, whatever you want to call it, is that it's a gauntlet. So who in their right mind is, unless you're the bottom 2 teams, like even then, who are they going to scrim it? Who are they going to scrim? They have 5 teams now. The only option is every team is going to want to scrim with the 6th team that didn't make it in. Because there's only 6 really good teams in Korea, but well, at least in champions. So you have 5 teams who are stuck knowing, oh, whoever wins this one, we have to play. Whoever wins this one, and it just continues to go. Like SKT is probably going to get first, and they're just going to be like, we don't want to scrim anyone. We have a chance of playing any of these teams. We don't want to reveal anything. So the system they have for the playoffs and qualifications to Worlds incentivizes teams to have these second teams that they force into this kind of gray zone of, we'll pay you and you can be on our team, but you can never qualify for champions until, like, for Scout, I'm sorry, you may be good, and I've seen a couple of your like Azubu streams, and you may be good, but you are never going to play until Easy and
if Faker ever gets if Faker gets sold to China for 5 million, then maybe he gets like this outside chance
And he
to
has a
sometimes start as
I
a
know.
second to easy hood. Like this
But
is
you could say the same joke that Thorin was using for, he has to slip, like, the only way Scout can get in is not only does he have to permanently injure Faker, but he also has to do the same to Easy Hood. Like, he's got to murder 2 people to make it. It just, and that's we know of Scout. How many other people do we not know their name? Does Jinair make all of their players stream? Does Ku even have anyone else there? I mean, I would be surprised.
Ku has
Ku.
Just Hojin and Wisdom, so 2 junglers. So
I think they might scrim with some Chinese teams more.
Yeah,
because of when they were. Who were they before that? What was their name before Ku?
G Tigers.
Was GE Tigers.
And before that, it was.
I know they were a Chinese streaming site.
Yeah, before
kind of helped get in.
But Ko really is the same streaming site. It's just like the Korean part of it. They have a different name in Korea.
Okay.
It's still the same organization, and it's also the same streaming service, just a different name.
Also, they're playing with China, but I mean, outside of playing with teams in different regions, there is no other. Why would you ever scrim like that? I mean, look at the West. If you look at the LCS teams, you have very few. The only times you can play are like, oh, you're on the other side of the bracket, so the only chance we'll see you is in the third place or first place. Which, by the way, third place is the most important match. I mean, that one. Yeah. I guess there depends on how if they do third place, winner goes to World.
No, it doesn't work anymore like that, though. So.
But that third place can still be hugely important.
Points.
Just points.
Points.
The first and the third match have given so much more influence on the actual game that you like. Who are you? If you're an LCS team and the top 6 qualify, who the fuck are you going to play? Who are you going to scrim against? The only teams you can scrim against are the ones you think they can give you a challenge and make you better. But then again, those are the ones that you may lose to.
Yeah.
Just like the way it's set up now. Indicative of
situations. I don't think Korea has that problem, but the West has the additional problem that once relegation is done, all the teams that are not in playoffs go to holiday. So the bottom tier teams are just not there. Especially also doing these international events, like for MSI, for example. Like, they could just scrim the teams that were there, not just because of the ping, but also because all the other teams, except for CLG, were just gone. It does not happen in Korea. Korea is one of the only regions. I mean, they do have holiday for just a few weeks, but Korea is probably the region that has the least downtime in scrims. And even though there are not games the next 2 weeks, they still practice, or they come back earlier from the holiday.
There's still a chance they could scrim even well on holiday. Korea is a much smaller, more, like, I would say, better infrastructure when it comes to literally the cables in the ground.
Yeah, it's also just from the country, the way it's built. You're never that far away from, so.
Where in the U.S., if you're I live in the middle of nowhere and I have terrible internet, and I tried playing when I moved to here, and I have 400 ping. To the NA server. I have about 240 to the Latin American server.
Have you tried EOS?
It'd be even worse. Where I live is not great connection.
Because once you're at the East Coast, like the whole Atlantic Ocean is just additional 20-30 ping.
I live in a town that has a Walmart.
Yeah.
You have to drive. I have to drive to get to civilization. So it doesn't really matter where you are. Like, if you go back to visit with your family and it just happens to be your family doesn't live in somewhere that's a huge mega city that has quality internet, you're fucked. Like, oh, we want to practice against you guys. Well, I'm not playing. I'm gonna DC 5 minutes into the game. It's just hugely different, but yes, it's a constant problem, and it's something that I don't know if it's gonna get changed. I mean, unless it really gets brought up, I don't see enough of a kind of like a wave of popularity pushing against Riot to change the rule.
I think
I mean, Riot
Casper
narrowly
and
dodged
Lace, yeah.
Samsung. What would you have thought if it was this past Worlds was Samsung Blue versus Samsung White? How would you feel if you were Riot Shoes going, huh?
Yeah.
It didn't
Well,
barely touch that bullet.
Yeah, it already was that. I think that it. Yeah, they dodged the bullet by just putting them in the groups that would meet earlier. And we get that
they
later
dodged
was
the
this
bullet by
video
one
put
of the
out.
teams not losing a game. They could just okay, we'll throw a game to get to the finals.
Yeah.
It's a different mindset they have that they didn't want. Like, they're both like, no, we're gonna beat the other
It
one.
was his mindset, yeah.
But
in the end, it was basically about both these teams because we knew whoever would make the final would actually win this.
Yes,
Like
of course.
OG would have maybe had a chance to take down one of these, but sadly, they
OG
would have
wasn't.
better teams than Starhorn.
they probably would have made it more convincing final.
Yeah, I would even OMG. Like,
But I mean, yes, they're lucky that the players themselves were motivated enough and wanted to be like, no, we don't need any advantage. We're gonna win, and we're gonna win every game. And they're also kind of lucky EDG shit the bed completely and gave White a free group. Because I was like, maybe EDG could be the one that upset, and White could be like, oh guys, we lost, and fall into the other bracket and then meet Blue. They kind of lucked out with a few things that happened in Worlds to make that. But that, if you're from Riot's perspective, that's not something you want. You don't want to see TSM versus TAM or something like. You want to see Team 80 carry mid, or like you want to see two different teams be able to, because it's a better story for them to be able to present. Specifically, if they could constantly get two regions. Having two regions is a much better story than saying, hey guys, remember the 5 other times we've seen these play and the probably millions of times they've scrimmed against each other? We're gonna see that. I mean, we've always seen it in Korea during the when Champions was a tournament. The wackiness that you'd see between sister teams, these oddball picks, the Galio, the Varus, you'd see these kind of like niche picks pulled out to try and like surprise the other team because they've played each other so often they know tendencies and one small advantage could be a huge impact on the game. So they kind of try and make you think, but it's not always the best. It's not always the most exciting game when you see sister teams play. It can be, but it's not always.
Yeah.
But I could still see like an alliance of Casper and Lace, so Lace being the Chinese equivalent. Together, both of these, I feel like they could push their own tournament, their own cross-regional tournament. I think they were plans. Yeah, I mean they could really just also make their own alternative Worlds tournament. Because
what I would like to see is just spring.
Yeah.
Just have the 8 teams take 8 teams from Korea, 12 from China, and or 10 and 10, and just play. Just have an LCS like split with them, with best of 3s or best of 2s or whatever you want to do, and just that would be fucking amazing.
But what I get is that Riot doesn't even like that. They don't really want that Korea and China make their own tournaments among each other, because then they realize that the real World Championship actually means nothing, because this tournament between China and Korea features a much higher level of play. I mean, the only reason Worlds, we could at least say that Worlds might have been the best tournament of the year in the past, and not the OGN, is because it's the only situation where actually the best team from China also comes in, or from the other regions. And right now
let's be real with World Championship. There was only one competitive group at Worlds last year. I mean, you could say C9 and Alliance, but the Najin wasn't that was competitive because Najin kind of took a nosedive after that. But the only real competitive group where you could be like, oh, any of these 4 teams could make it was B.
Oh, C, mate.
Yeah. No, TSM, TPA, SK.
Was that
going into it before Sven Skering?
Oh yeah, like that.
All of that. that was the most like, wow, it could go anywhere. Like that was the most difference. That you had Group D had okay, it could be Alliance, it could be Cloud9. It swapped up a few times, but Group B was where people were like, no, dude, SK is gonna come in. No, TPA is looking really. Like, it was the one group that you could see any of the 4 teams coming out. That's what I mean by competitive. Is that any of the 4 could come out.
Yeah, without the Svenska run, I'm sure that SK would have met.
Yeah.
But that was the only one. And then by the time the tournament began, it was like they were fun games, and I watched all of them. But it wasn't like I don't. I mean, I've watched the Dota finals, and I don't know how they all play it, but
that's my
having
problem.
all the teams play is interesting.
That's also my problem with the World Championship. Really, it's another one because we don't really see upsets the way the seeding works. Because like who is going to make the like sometimes teams through one patch make this like jump forward, they really increase in their strength, but who's going to do this? It's not the Western teams, they're way too far away, not these wildcard teams because they're absolutely irrelevant. The only team that at this point had actually is teams that actually like a chance to maybe challenge the Samsung teams for the top spots. These were SK Telecom T1 because of Faker. They were also the only team that actually had some resistance against Nigel White Shield in the qualifiers when they had their run against both the KT teams and then SKT. And on the other hand, we had the KT Arrows, who just won champions. So these are SKT and KTA were 2 of the teams in the world where I could say there's a realistic chance that, or at least a small chance that these 2 teams like find something new, something special, and make this leap forward that brings them close to the top position, can actually do something in this tournament. But just saying we just take 3 teams from Korea, well, the 4th and the 5th best team from Korea is still much, much closer to actually... and those are the only teams that can pull these upsets. Like in Season 2, when the regions were closer, you didn't really know who were going to win. You didn't know. But right now, you know...
were they closer?
The only team...
Or...
Yeah, Season 2
they
were
artificially closer.
No, they were actually Season 2.
Season
okay,
yeah.
2, not 3, not 2.
No,
I heard 2, okay.
Yeah, but what we have right now in a situation that the teams, like those teams from EU, those teams from NA, and also those teams from Taiwan, they're way too far away to, even if they play the top, still not going to win, and they're not even going to get close to it. And if we want to see upsets at those large tournaments, if we don't want to win for sure, then we actually need more of the best teams in the world there.
At least
this argument is about...
It's gonna happen this year a bit at least, with the Chinese teams being...
The Chinese teams and Korean teams are gonna be fun to watch, but I mean, like what you said, you're not going to see like what Najin did in the Gauntlet. You're not going to see 3 days of back-to-back-to-back where they're just on fire for 3 days. Because it happens over weeks now, there's a huge cooldown period that can happen.
Yeah. But this...
So...
Yeah. But exactly, Najin was one example, and this is... like another team like Najin, like KTA, like SKT, you could have done the same at Worlds and actually pulled an upset. But right now, the current format, if we just have this low number of Korean and Chinese teams, then the other teams that are so far away from this level of play that even with the lucky week they cannot reach, and we're just going to have another tournament, another World Championship where we can name like 2 or 3 teams at the start who are going to win this, and we can be 100%. Like it's close to 100% that this will be right. And I mean, also the clashes between Chinese and Korean teams, I feel like they are overweighted right now, because what I see is that only SKT and Co Tigers can actually challenge the top 5 Chinese teams. I do not see.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Some of those, when it comes to like CJ, I'm very afraid for CJ.
No, CJ.
I'm very afraid for Jin Air because I don't know if like the way they talked about GBM and how he's talked about his own like training regimen is he prepares by understanding the individual opponents. And when you have so many more opponents that you have to like take, you don't play week to week, you don't play day to day. I don't know if his style of play is going to really transfer over. I mean, the only other team is if KT really goes on like a tear and shows up as a 3rd decent team. I think that's the only way you have 3 teams from Korea looking good. is that I do think that the 3 teams from China are probably going to. The way they turned it on during the spring playoffs, was like crazy different from the end of the split, and it was very interesting to watch.
Yet you also have to consider, because LPL right now has so many games every week,
and then
teams are playing
Demacia Cup.
so but also just the LPL regular season, teams are playing so much, so they can actually do this individual preparation. But then you have the Master Cup. The Master Cup was already a lot better than the regular season, aside from, of course, teams that had players out due to injuries like LGD. They had to do this crazy swap shit.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so but
just even if you take
if
you take LPL and Demacia Cup, you have so many games, and you just can't give you can't give a fuck that many games.
Yeah, that's not even all. There's also the X Championship coming up again. There will be another Nest. I mean, this year G League was without the LPL teams, which I find kind of sad, but it's also kind of understandable because you couldn't possibly squeeze it into this tight schedule. But yeah, and I think what we are seeing right now is that the Chinese teams have not the time to prepare for every single matchup and just have to play their standard stuff and like experiment a bit. But once we get in the playoff, especially to Worlds, I expect them to be even stronger and to really bring their A game. So I know a lot of people are saying
China
right now,
wanting to win for the first time too. I think there's going to be a drive behind them wanting to win.
Yeah, this has been hugely important for them, the rivalry to Korea. They want to beat Korea this one time after having lost 2 finals. So just by saying that, I'm not sold. I think SKT is a very strong team right now, but I'm not sold they will go over the Chinese teams the same way they go over Korean teams. I do not think there is.
Last week, like if Sam was on here, he would be. We're all kind of very tentative when it comes to SKT is destroying everyone so much that it's kind of hard to really see where they are.
Yeah.
Is that they're one of the only teams in the top 5 or top 6? Like, we're just gonna pick whatever and still win. Where we can't truly get a full level gauge on them. They're much better, but how, like, is the region just overall weaker? Is the region still strong, but they're just the best? Like,
we need to. I'm not entirely sure who is going to win Worlds. I cannot say.
No.
And SKT is surely right now looks like a candidate, but I don't think it's.
SKT is gonna go to Worlds, but that's as far as I'll say.
For sure. Yeah.
I thought
SKT. I'm not going to say that they are looking better than all Chinese teams. I think they are.
Not
even though EDG had some bad weeks recently, they're now back up there. I think it's still a tie, and overall, SKT is the one strong Korean team that will stand against multiple strong Chinese teams. One of these is going to win this.
There's still only 3, and there's a good chance one will knock the other one out again. Like every year, one Chinese team kicks out another one. Must they start another club for some reason?
But that brings a question with Worlds too. Is I don't remember exactly who brought it up. I think it was either Thorn or Monty brought up. Where do you think the teams will boot camp?
Where?
Where? Do you think they're going to go to? Do you think China and Korean teams are going to fly to Europe to boot camp in Europe, or they're going to stay in their own place and boot camp from where they are?
They will
stay in their place.
Do you think European teams are going to leave Europe to go to Korea and China to boot camp to come back to Europe?
They'll have to.
Yes, Fnatic will.
Yes.
I'm sure of it.
They will have to.
I don't have any information that confirms it, but I'm already sure of it that they're going to.
I mean, why would you go to Europe right now if you're Korea, like or China? Just stay in your regions, play against each other. You could even go a bit closer.
Last year, with the games being in Southeast Asia and Korea, there was an incentive to have all the teams meet up in one area. But now that the games are not in remote areas that are favorable for Korea and China, why would they give a shit?
They won't. They will just. Some might go a bit earlier to avoid too much jet lag, but most teams will just appear like a day or 2 before the first game they have to play.
Even if you look at Europe, also last year, because we had these. I think last year it was the Turkish team who didn't really boot camp there, the wildcard team. And in Europe, even though they were at the World Championship, they had nobody to scrim because the three LCS teams that actually qualified all went over to bootcamp. All the other LCS teams were on their holidays. Like even the challenger teams were on their holidays. So how was the team called again? Which was it? That
The Turkish team?
Turkish team
I
in
think
season 4 was
Dark
I'll get it in a
Passage.
second.
Wasn't
Dark
Dark,
Passage. Yeah,
Dark
Dark
Passage.
Passage actually ended up preparing by playing ranked 5. They prepared
Wow.
for World Championship by playing ranked 5.
They'll probably have to do it again this year.
Yeah, and they were lucky back then. They were lucky because there was the expansion coming up, and a few challenger teams were coming out very early and already at
Wow.
least trying to get themselves in a position because it was before the reset. So at least they had some kind of people in ranked 5s to practice. But will be the same this year. Even though Worlds will be in Europe, there won't be anyone in Europe to practice but these 3 LCS teams. If one of them goes, they're just 2. Like it's the question. They have to have some kind of agreement. If all 3 world teams stay in Europe, then maybe there's like a bit of an incentive for the Asian teams to come as well. But once one of them goes, and I expect Fnatic to go, there's no chance there will be any kind of bootcamp in Europe.
I
just
think
come for the
there's
games.
0% chance Koreans and Chinese are going to go
Yeah.
over because they can
Yeah,
comfortably play from their own place. They can
Exactly.
scrim each other. They can scrim their own instead of having to fly over 15 people for the Korean teams to fly over 2 different of their backups. They can do a lot more with their team and then maybe fly over only one team they want to play against. Like when Shield went, they flew over Sword 2 for season 3. I mean,
yeah. But talking about worlds, another interesting thing I want to touch upon is that substitutes, because at MSI there was only one substitute allowed per team, and in LCS we also have this stupid rule that for the first game of the week you have to release your roster 3 days before, and for the second game it has to be the day before. For the second day of LCS each week you have to say the day before you're going to start. You're not actually, while they're still midweek. Although they are not only just midweek, but also mid-series substitutions allowed.
Oh yeah.
It's not really. You have to release your starting roster 3 days before, and you have just allowed one substitute you can actually use.
So is that going to be for playoffs too, where you can only, like, you'll have? Well, let me start with the weeks. So if you play Saturday and you play the last game of Saturday, and then you play the first game of Sunday for
the roster you want to.
Can you release your roster after you see what happens Saturday?
No.
For TSM, say you can play Wild Turtle.
No, the roster you want to start on Saturday, you have to release. I think it's
Thursday?
On Thursday.
Wednesday.
It's out on
Thursday.
Thursday. You have to tell to Riot by the end of Wednesday. So on Thursday they can put their fantasy LCS up there and say who's going to start. I think fantasy LCS is also a huge reason right now. They have to fix this in some way because, and for the second day, for the Sunday, you have to be Saturday immediately after LCS ends. So you don't have until the evening's on. But immediately after it ends, you have to tell Riot who you're going to start next week, and it's also being told to your opponent. So you don't actually. So your opponent always knows way before who are you going to play. And you also have.
Korea's the only one that does it right, where you can change mid. You don't really have to say. You just change it in between games.
China,
you can just change.
China, you can also do this. You just have to announce.
No, I believe I heard Kelsey on one of the China talks say that you have to have, like, the reason why Acorn plays game 1, Flame plays game 2 is because you have to have both rosters locked before you begin playing.
I didn't know.
Oh, that's why they do that.
That's what I heard from her. I mean, that's it sounds
also
as ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like if you have these substitutes, I mean, what is the point if you can't really use them?
Always Acorn played game 1, Flame played game 2.
Yeah, I'm just so afraid that White is going to pull the same thing at Worlds.
Yeah.
Say just one substitute because everything else will be a disadvantage for the Western teams. I mean,
I think it's very likely.
That's crazy.
Or they don't call it disadvantage, but it's just a disadvantage for certain teams in certain regions. I mean, if you just look at it, every single team in Korea has in-house subs. And all the teams in China, they have sometimes like 20 players living with them. Then they have like 5-6 coaches there, and they have just their... I mean, look at Edward Gaming. Edward Gaming has a support player that plays solo queue with Death, just so they talk with each other and they can translate the communication to Mako so he can understand how Death thinks.
Too much funny.
I heard about
Yeah,
that.
this
Yeah,
is.
but I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's gonna. I think the change would if one substitute affects China more than it affects Korea.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, what?
Because they have so many more options. China
have
has
so many more
options
yeah.
for players. I think that's the bigger reason too.
I think in general the top 3 teams that would go from Korea will have no problem with one sub, but
Only
if
has one sub.
yeah, because most only have one. But it might be a bit annoying if they can't actually change mid-series. If they actually
You can't change mid-series. What the fuck's the point?
Well, they were allowed in MSI, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't have easy win 3 games.
I know. But do we know if they were like, oh, we're just gonna play him, or was it like, no, here's your write down who you have. Okay, we have Easy Home for the first 2 games, just in case.
It seems unlikely that.
I understand, but I have not heard anything about it. That's why I'm saying is
it's actually possible.
Knowing,
They could have thought it was the same as with Ku, play easy unit 3 games, and then if we hadn't won, we put in Faker. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible they actually had to write it down. We have to hear from Riot about that. Fuck, that's. Well, they have to show their rules for Worlds. Well,
that wasn't something I had thought about with this.
No.
That didn't even cross my mind.
That's pretty fucked up, actually.
Yeah.
Well.
You also have to look at it. This is just. There's also another thing. I know I didn't want to make this too much of a Western League talk show, but what we see right now in North America, we have now 2 teams that actually have a second player living with them, like CLG with the Huhi's situation in mid lane, who isn't actually going to play, and now TSM who has Keith as for Wildhawk. But these are like 2 examples, and Europe no one does it.
Does Meteor still live in the team house?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay. So C9, 3 examples. But no one does this. Meanwhile, even in the LMS in Taiwan, teams already have substitutes living there, especially TPA, who when Wins retired, not brought in 1 jungler, but brought in 2 junglers. They've also still some other like players with positions in Hong Kong Esports, a team of toys, does the same really, where they have substitutes. Like even they do this. It's just, it almost seems like it's like a logical step to take, where what you see in Korea and China, where they have this huge amount of players. They have 1 for each position at least. In China, sometimes even 480 carries on 1 team. This is because, I mean, it's also interesting. Would like to have the opinion. Why are these Asian leagues, or why? I mean, West. It's of course in some way the money, but they can't afford these.
I think it's the fact that China has 25 servers too. They have so much. It's so many more talent. Like the ability to find talent is much larger.
Yeah, but it's something else.
Like if you see someone on not one, I think there's only like 2 main servers in China, or 1. But if you see someone on one of the other ones, you can be like, hey, we're interested. Make an account on here and let's see what you can do in like a month and a half or 2 months. Play, and if you're good enough, we'll pick you up.
Yeah,
you can't do that on the East Coast. Like on the East Coast, you'd be like, oh, hey, can you uproot yourself? Come over here to the West Coast, play, get to Challenger, and see how you do. And then maybe we'll pull you. Like,
but the subs in China, they also all live with the team. It's not the situation. They all live with the team.
Yeah.
Like in North America, we mostly have the problem that the East Coast has such bad ping. The players from there can never ever reach Challenger, or it's very unlikely.
Yeah.
So we have a situation where, for example,
very small.
Yeah, what I heard, like most players we have in an ALCS, they're all born on the West Coast. What a surprise! Whereas, at least from what I've heard, in the other MOBA, the much smaller one, Smite, where the servers are just East Coast, suddenly all the professional players are just from the East Coast.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. What is what could possibly be the reason?
I think also a big thing too is that the notable, at least for NA, the notable NA team is like the Counter Logic Gaming, TSM, Cloud9. They're getting into different games. So instead of
Yeah.
expanding within league, they're expanding through other games. So instead of picking up like a challenger team, which eventually you're going to have to rebrand and sell,
They.
Yeah.
Well.
sell,
So.
or this is my brother. He has the same last name as I do, but he has a different first name. He is going to be the new coach for the. So
I mean,
it
like
seems
TSM
like
could do this so
instead
easily.
of like picking up teams below them in the challenger scene and bringing up the talent through them, they're kind of like still poach. They're still looking at the challenger team, and if they need to pick someone up, they either look to Korea or China, or they go down and go, who looks good? No one. Okay, to China.
Okay, yeah.
But it seems like they're spreading out instead of within the same game.
The other thing I thought about is the different social situation, because what we have in the West right now are still players. They finish school, they're taking a few like gap years before they're then moving on to college, to university, or to whatever else they want in life. We have extremely in China and also in some extent in Korea are players that are just coming from very poor background, and they really need this. They don't demand much pay, they just want some place to stay, to sleep. Like most famous example, for example, in China is now UZI, who just grew up in living in this gaming houses. He doesn't really have this kind of family. The teams are his family. These are players, they are, especially the small players on the small teams, they're much less demanding. So you can't just say that, oh, I want a few players in there, but just like the parents live in a small flat somewhere. They don't, if I just pay them $1,500 a month, they will play for me, and they're not just a few ways while they were trying to get in some college, but they actually want to save the money. They need this very bad, so they will stay forever until I kick them.
Yeah, they need a Jewish mother. You don't get a gap year with a Jewish mother. But I mean, there are so many differences between the East and the West. At least like China, Korea, and even Taiwan now, with Taiwan importing teams that they seem to be improving.
For me, Taiwan has always been mini Korea because
yeah, but I mean, like there is the aberration of season 2, but it seems like with the fact that the region has the 8 teams are now all from Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau. They're a lot more concentrated talent, which is filtering into certain rosters, and then they're also pulling some people in from Korea, and I don't think they're pulling in players from China, but I think they're pulling in like support staff from China. So they're improving just simply because of location.
I don't think so. But I think it's just they have a similar gaming culture in Taiwan than there is in Korea. It's just a matter of fact that Taiwan is even smaller than Korea, even lower population. So they don't have like even less of a talent pool than the other two regions. But even there we see that they have a surprising amount of local talent out of this region actually. They have this tryharding in the solo queue even in Taiwan, and for me, Taiwan is always a Korea with less population, with less talent pool, of the same drive behind it. And I really feel like Taiwan would also be good in a way if they weren't that close to Korea and China, because Taiwanese teams are not screaming Korean teams that much. And Chinese teams don't swim in general with the Taiwanese and the Korean teams. It's maybe just the shared solo queue that they can play solo queue on the Korean server. Solo queue is better than ever now that also Chinese teams are coming over there. But overall, I feel like Taiwan is a region that also has down the culture, has down the approach in the way that Korea has, and is kind of trying to imitate what Korea is doing on a smaller scale because they're a smaller country. But yeah, for me, the win of season 2 is also not that much of an outlier, because if you look back what the teams had, the Western teams had basically no infrastructure. A few of them, the first few had moved in the gaming houses where like these 5 young guys that are walking clueless around there, just getting accustomed to living alone, don't really having any coaching staff. Then where or some of them didn't even have gaming houses. Then were the Korean teams. I mean, if you have looked back at the house tours that mattered, it was like these very small apartments there, where they has these like field beds where they're sleeping, mean, they had a coach living with them, but it's still not. They just like CJ. Each team had one coach back at the time. Then you look over to Taiwan, what TPA had. TPA at the time had already like they had living space. They had their own gaming office with the 5 players, and they had 2 substitutes living with them. They had a coach. They had like an analyst. They had a manager just for the brand. They had the manager for the team that just like it was Erica that's just doing all this stuff. So what I always say is that TPA, one of the main reasons TPA won this Season 2 World Championship is that they had better infrastructure that many Western teams have even now.
Yeah,
For me, that's the reason. And I actually think that TPA also didn't improve their infrastructure much. I feel like the whole GPL since then, especially the Southeast Asia part, has kind of been stuck and didn't really improve. And the scene in Singapore also kind of collapsed. It was back then they were kind of competitive. They weren't that far behind.
Silence.
Just like on Fantastic 5, there was a couple of teams that were pretty good within the Hong Kong region.
Yeah.
At least LMS is making a prize again now. Taiwan. Yeah, that was. You could definitely put the victory Season 2 on that. Because the West had so little infrastructure. Except like CLG had some, TSM had some.
They didn't have. I mean, they had some, but it was kind of like, oh, it's an ex-player who's still hanging out.
Yeah, well, I don't say that coaching, but at least they had like CLG had like directed boot camps, and they were as 5 men actually practicing together. While Gambit, I don't even want to know what the hell they did in those days.
Well, the better question is, what does even Gambit have now?
Oh yeah. Well, not much improvement there, except now they have no star mid laner to carry them anymore. God.
Just, I feel like an interesting thing to end the show is that I heard that even some European teams are looking at Korean players for next season already.
Oh yeah, I've heard. I think Sam was talking about that too.
Well,
yeah, it's. He already did on this.
No, not on this
show. Not on the show. No, I've
Twitter.
been tweeting the past couple weeks. He's been talking about how he thinks at least 5 more teams are going to try and get Koreans.
Next week is going to be
yeah,
fun.
Like he says they should, of course, because like it's Sam. Sam always sees like replacing your whole roster with Koreans like it's the final perfect solution for everything.
Yes, it's perfect.
Well,
I think there are actually at least a few teams looking at these Korean players. And like from the very start, I was one of the people that a lot of people were saying when all these Korean players left for China, they said, oh, they're just going for one split. They're all going to hate it. They're all going to come back, or at least after 1 year. There were a lot of people around that, even known people, experts on the scene that said it's just temporary. And once they had their paycheck, they come back, they play for Korea again. What we see right now was that I think it's only getting more Koreans leaving Korea. It's only going to get more. I see like very few Koreans maybe returning in China that had horrible experiences like on bottom tier teams where everyone hated them. They say, okay, I got enough money, now I want another split where I can show the world that I'm still a decent player. So
I don't
maybe
see
someone like
LPL teams leaving, like LPL Koreans leaving.
Yeah, no.
I think there's so much more competition within.
It's going to get even more. Like I mean, now even the Chinese challenger teams, so below LSPL level, are all mass recruiting Korean players. Whenever you see a new team that are coming up there, you know, who are they? I have never heard of them. And then you look at the roster, they have 2 Koreans there. Like all these. I think I know that there are just about like over 60 active Korean players in China right now that I know of. But what I suspect, just from the way whenever I see a new team that they have Koreans, I think just from the active players, no coaches, no retired players currently in the coaching position, just players on roster. I think it's over 80 at least, maybe over 90 what they have there on Korean players. They even pick up the once you get close to high Diamond 4 in Korea, you're going to get the offers from the Chinese teams because these teams are going to take everyone that is close to Master Tier and is Korean, with name Korean attached to them.
You have no. Is there a Korean on your passport? All right, let's go. Pack your bags. Go to China. Got you a nice bed here.
So even if people didn't like it, money is money.
Yeah,
money
of course.
With such a very short career for, I mean, even.
And they get a lot of
you look at StarCraft 2 players, and they have it's all on that one person. They still have relatively short careers. The only careers I've seen in esports that are long are CS.
Yeah, but
some StarCraft have been going for a while.
CS will change. It's just that CS:GO is now growing quickly. That they've actually all this new talent. For a long time, CS was kind of stagnating. So all the old people from CS 1.6, from CS Source, could just continue to be pros. Yeah, continue to play, and they were all still good because there weren't that many new people coming in. The first few years. Especially the first year of CS:GO, looked like this game was dead. This game was never going to get anywhere. But now it's going to be a big esport.
Yep.
It's also right now we see in StarCraft. Craft also has some players in there that already had 7-year careers or 8-year. This is the longest.
But I mean, like for a team sport. For a team sport,
oh, yeah.
when it's StarCraft, it's just you. As long as you can continue to play, you can. But with a team, I mean. If you have a drive to win, like look at Forgiven. Forgiven is going to burn out faster than any other player because he wants to be on a team that can win. And if he's not on that team that can win, we've seen he has sat out and gone back home and played on a challenger team.
But another problem I see in League is also, on the one hand, the patch changes. I feel like the patch changes are way too huge, way too
You can't start that now. It's way too late into the episode.
Yeah.
Okay, it's way too late in the episode. Okay. Another reason I see is also the fans a bit that they like you've just had a career of played 2 years. People already called you a dinosaur. You're there for so long. You're washed up. I mean, like it's just been 2 years, and in real sports, you have sometimes a slump that lasts a year. But in esports, if you play, especially in League, if you play bad for longer than 2 weeks, then the people want your fucking head. They want to see you and they say, retire already. Your time is over. You had your one split where you were good. This is
not only that,
not the foundation you can build careers on.
You could play 2 splits and people want you to retire, and that's 36 games. You've played 36 games. You've not played a full split of LPL.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, but now in League, only those names like Mad Life, I feel like they can stay over time. So it's really just a handful of players in Korea, less than 10 that can actually. I mean, like now we even see Shy falling away from this. I still think Shy is probably one of the best top laner, maybe the best top laner of all time. But
is Shy's
just so
personal? Is he is he just leaving the game, or is it being overshadowed? Because I think he's still good enough to play. It's whether or not he wants to, in my opinion.
You think so?
I mean, compared to some of the other top laners in playing in Champions, he's still up to snuff.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, he'll probably never fall lower than that. There's just like, if you're such a talented player, there's a level you don't have to be play at your max, and you don't have to really put that much practice in it. You're still going to be good. Like there are just these natural talents. They can practice for 2-3 hours a day, and they're still going to be better than all those lower challenger players or just in the lower teams that practice all day, play 16 hours. It's just not. Sometimes that's natural talent. You can't really fall that deep if you have all this talent still there. You're just not going to be at the top.
Anything else? Because I do have an outro.
All right. So hit it.
So, well, do you have any shout-outs you want to say, Soren, before we go out with some epic memes?
No, not really. Go ahead.
Okay. It's farewell to Korean Eldwis and his glorious casting career. of 2 weeks.
It was funny. It
It was enjoyable to watch him cast.
It was really enjoyable.
Fucking hilarious. Just being able to listen to Monty rag on a caster is so hard.
I'm sure there will be more opportunities for him.
Probably.
Well, he's
think
going to
that's the
law
last
school,
we
it
have.
seems, so.
Yeah.
Depending on how long League lasts, it may be the last we really see of him.
Yeah, that's.
Just, I mean,
Yeah,
law
that's
school is
indeed a sad
pretty
one.
fucking intense.
We'll have to see. Well, thanks, Wildhawk, for coming. So enjoying
Thanks
being.
thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Alright. Let's see the edge on
See ya.
this.